All right, so you guys wanted the full story on Hezbollah's drone attack in Israel, right? Like beyond the headlines and all that.
Definitely a need for a deeper look, for sure.
We've got reports from Al Jazeera and Israeli news sources. It's, it paints a pretty wild picture.
It's fascinating stuff, actually.
Yeah.
Really exposes the rising tensions. This is just some isolated event.
Not at all. So for everyone listening, let's break this down. We're talking a two-pronged attack here.
Oh, absolutely.
Drones, AND rockets aimed directly at a Golani Brigade training camp near Haifa.
Which, let me just say, that's a huge EE deal.
Huge. And for those who don't follow every intricacy of the Israeli military, hitting the Golani Brigade. That's like...
Going for the jugular.
Exactly. Like these guys are the elite infantry, the best of the best.
The tip of the spear. So to target their training camp, that's a direct hit, symbolically and strategically. Big win for Hezbollah in that sense.
Oh, for sure. And a major blow to Israel, both for their actual security, but also, the whole morale aspect.
Oh, absolutely. Psychological warfare at its finest.
Right. And then you look at the casualties. 3 Israelis dead, 67 wounded. It just gets heavier.
Yeah, those are some serious numbers.
What I found weird, though, neither source mentions if these casualties were soldiers or civilians.
That's a very calculated silence, isn't it?
It is.
It could be Hezbollah trying to manage how the international community sees this whole thing.
Yeah.
Especially if there were civilian casualties.
Right, gotta think about the optics.
Or, maybe they're intentionally keeping it vague, sowing chaos,
Psychological games, man. Speaking of which, how Hezbollah is framing this whole thing is pretty telling. They're calling it direct retaliation.
Right. Gotta have a justification.
For alleged Israeli strikes in Beirut, specifically the Al-Nuwairi and Al-Basta neighborhoods, which, from how Al Jazeera words it, sound pretty residential.
Classic case of controlling the narrative, right? Frame it as retaliation, especially for attacks on civilians. Suddenly they're the victims.
Yeah, textbook.
Powerful way to get people on your side, even if the reality on the ground tells a different story.
Totally. And to really hammer that point home, they even quote a Hezbollah leader in the article. He's like bragging about their drone capabilities, how far into Israel they can reach now.
Oh, I saw that. Pure bravado.
Yeah.
But you gotta remember, that message isn't just for Israel. It's for their own people, their supporters.
Projecting strength.
Exactly. Hezbollah wants to be seen as the protector, the force to be reckoned with.
So how's Israel responding to all this? I mean, they're usually so quick with counteroffensives.
Yeah, well, from what I'm reading, they seem caught off guard, which is, frankly, pretty rare for them.
Yeah, Israel's intelligence agencies are usually on point.
Right. But their Iron Dome, their fancy air defense system, totally bypassed.
No way.
And the sirens didn't even go off. That's concerning, to say the least.
Wow.
Exposes a real vulnerability, which honestly, we're not used to seeing from Israel.
So not only is this an actual security breach, but it plays right into Hezbollah's narrative.
Exactly. Makes Hezbollah look strong, Israel look vulnerable. It's a double whammy.
Definitely not the image Israel wants to project.
And the language coming from Israeli military sources is really telling, too.
How so?
They're calling this the deadliest attack since the war began. Not this conflict or this recent thing, but the war.
Oh, wow. You're right. They're framing this as something much bigger.
Exactly. And, their reaction kind of supports that. They're admitting that Hezbollah used diversion tactics.
I mean,
Those rockets. They were a distraction to cover the drones. This wasn't just some lucky strike. This was a planned, coordinated operation.
It's like you start digging into the articles and it gets even wilder,
Oh, tell me about it.
Like Hezbollah stepping up their activity in South Lebanon, that's not nothing.
Right. And then you've got, that whole thing about Israel potentially being low on ammo. Not exactly something you see in the news every day, is it?
That's major red flag territory, if you ask me.
Absolutely. It's one of those details that, it can get lost in all the noise.
Yeah.
But it really speaks to the broader context here.
Right.
You got to figure, if Hezbollah gets even a whiff of weakness, whether it's real or just perceived, they could be emboldened, take even bigger risks.
Yeah, like a high-stakes game of chicken. And it feels like the whole region's caught in the middle.
That's a pretty apt analogy, actually. Yeah. And I think what gets missed in all of this, the strategic stuff, the military moves, is the human cost,
For sure.
It's easy to get caught up in the headlines, but behind all of it, there are people just trying to live their lives. This conflict, this fear, this uncertainty, it's their daily reality.
It's easy to forget that sitting here, thousands of miles away.
Absolutely. But their stories matter. Their lives are literally hanging in the balance.
So where do we go from here? What's next? Do you have like a crystal ball or something?
If I had a crystal ball, I wouldn't be here, would I? I would be on a beach somewhere far, far away from all this.
Sign me up for that.
But in all seriousness, I can't predict the future. But what we can do, what's important, is to look at what we do know, right? The information we have, and try to understand the potential trends, the motivations at play.
Makes sense. So walk me through it. What are we talking about here?
All right, so let's look at some possibilities. One scenario, Israel, feeling the heat from this attack, they might decide to launch a major counteroffensive, something to really cripple Hezbollah.
But wouldn't that risk like a much wider conflict, maybe even pull in other countries in the region?
Precisely. That's the tightrope here. Hezbollah's got powerful friends, and they're not just going to sit back and watch. It's a tinderbox,
Right.
and one wrong move.
Oh.
Exactly.
So much tension. I mean, for people like me, for anyone listening who's trying to keep up, what's the real takeaway here?
I think a big thing, the thing we can't ignore, is the power shift. Hezbollah has shown a level of, sophistication, strategic thinking that's honestly surprising. This isn't the same Hezbollah we were talking about a few years back.
They've like leveled up or something.
Exactly. They're willing to hit Israeli military targets head on. They're finding holes in Israel's defenses, which is almost unheard of. That changes everything. Israel, the whole world really, has to rethink how to deal with this. This isn't just some small-time conflict anymore.
It's like you said before, this attack, it's part of something way bigger, right?
Absolutely. And that bigger picture, that's what we got to pay attention to. This isn't about drones or rockets, not really. It's about changing allegiances. A whole region teetering on the edge, and the very real chance of things spiraling way, way out of control.
Which leaves everyone wondering, what happens now? What's Hezbollah gonna do next?
$1 million question, right? And if I had that answer, well, we'd be having a different conversation. But maybe instead of trying to predict the future, we should be asking a different question entirely.
Oh, I'm game. What's the question?
What if, instead of what's next, it was what could be different? Like, what can anyone do to actually calm things down? What would peace even look like in a place as complicated as this?
Man, those are some heavy questions. It's so easy to just get stuck in the news cycle, the immediate what now, trying to figure out how to make things better. That's a whole different ballgame.
No doubt. It's a tough one. But it's a conversation we got to have. The more we know, the better equipped we are to actually talk about this stuff, to maybe even push for something better.
Couldn't agree more. Big thanks to everyone listening in for joining us on this deep dive. It's a complex issue, constantly changing, and we'll be here to break it all down every step of the way. For now, keep those questions coming and stay informed.